So always feel like that's important for me to let everyone know, so that we don't overshare or say things that there'll be evidence of later. Um, so it's great to have everybody here. This is our 5th meeting, and we'll have one more next month. So just as a reminder, if you haven't done all of your work, you'll need to have all of your book reports and your final paper to me before the final meeting next month. So make sure that you get that in. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. If you're not sure which papers you have sent in, you can email me at josh@vacog.org, and I can check and see what you have turned in versus what you still owe. So hope everyone's doing good. It's been a pretty emotional day here in the Martin household as our youngest, Ella, graduated from high school today. So we've got all the family here. So if you hear things in the background, that's the family that is all here under one roof. It's been kind of a crazy house. So anyway, I would love to hear. Actually, let's start off with prayer first. Let's do that. It's always good to start off with prayer. So God, we come to you today. We thank you. We love you. We honor you today, Lord. God, we just would just ask that you would guide and direct us for the next few moments. God, as we learn from each other, as we learn together, we learn about you and our callings that you have placed upon us, Lord. God, I thank you for those that are on this call and for the dedication that they show each month and doing all of their work and participating in these Zoom calls. We just ask that you would guide us the next few moments. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen. All right. As we do with each one of these calls, and in case you didn't know where you were, this is meeting number 5, I believe, of the Youth Ministry Certification program. About half of you have already turned in all of your work, and we're having those certificates processed as we speak. And if you didn't finish, it's okay. You weren't required to finish early. But we just need for you to make sure you get those all of your work in within the next month. And I don't know what I was thinking when we scheduled this. The ending of this certification is right before youth camp. So I don't know what I was thinking, but that's where we are with this. But I would love to hear some feedback from you on the book that you read this month. So somebody jump in and let me know what your thoughts are on the book that you did your report on this month. Crickets.
Hey, Bishop, I read mine, as you know, got way ahead. And the nuts and bolts one, like you said, was very tedious. But I still think there was some core values in there that are critical. Some of the things are out of date. I've been reading this one now, not part of our reading, but this is a good one if somebody wants to pick it up. It's called Next Gen Faith. And this is from Jeff Grinnell, who travels and coaches youth pastors. He and I attended a conference and roomed together, but he's got 4 or 5 books out. But this one really is talking about just some really core things, getting back to discipleship, getting back to prayer, getting back to biblical knowledge. And I think the nuts and bolts kind of mentioned that as well. But I just wanted to mention this one. You can see Matt's coming in. we just got dismissed, so couple us in there. Bishop just asked about the last book we read and what we may have learned from it.
All right, somebody else join in.
I'll go.
Okay.
I'm working on the your first 2 years in youth ministry. And one of the things that stood out to me was how real and raw he was. Very transparent, you know, on like the mistakes and then the lessons he learned, which obviously always helps us. And you know, one of the things that stood out that I guess saddened me, I guess, was the thought where he was saying, this was early part of the book though, where he said, you know, longevity in our field is uncommon. So yeah, but I just really, I'm learning a lot from just how real and raw he was. And I tend to be like that when I share with students. So, you know, anyway, it was just refreshing to know that he's sharing from, you know, what he's made mistakes in and then the lessons he's learned and how that can help us.
Well, that's good. And you know, that book was written by Doug Fields. Doug Fields is like one of the godfathers of youth ministry. He was doing youth ministry years before I even began. And he was the model for a lot of us, my generation of youth pastors coming up. And he is very real in his assessment of his own ministry. What's interesting about that, about the book, it being called Your First 2 Years in Youth Ministry, the average span of ministry for one youth pastor or youth leader in a church is 18 months. And that's really a sad statistic, honestly. For years, the big joke amongst youth pastors was, you know, how many youth pastors does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is none, because they don't stay long enough to see one go out. And you know, that really was sad. You know, and so it's tough. And you know, there are a lot of reasons for that. A lot of times, you know, churches can't sustain to pay a youth pastor or a youth leader. Sometimes it's people's individual issues that they just can't stick with something long enough. They get there past the honeymoon stage, and then when the real ministry happens, as they say, they don't stick with it. And so I would like to see that statistic change drastically. I think that we owe it to our students. And to have that kind of transition so quickly, it's no wonder it's so difficult for us to build those relationships with our students. What are you guys' thoughts on the longevity of youth pastors and youth leaders?
Well, Bishop, like you said, when I first started youth ministry 20-something years ago, read Doug's book then, and went to youth specialties, I think the average was 36 months. And then a couple of years ago was 18. Now it's 11. But honestly, I spend the first year in youth ministry getting to know the people, knowing the students, building the networks with the school systems. And so I've been fortunate to be in the same market for, you know, almost 20 years now, 13 at the same church in various roles. But you got to get to know the people, and a lot of the teenagers now, it takes time to warm up. So I think if it's considered a short assignment, then you can't build that kind of commitment and connection with students. And honestly, I was aided a little bit in the fact that students saw me in the schools when I took over this interim role. They already knew who I was, or I wouldn't have been able to build that kind of rapport so quickly. But it's critical. And I think the biggest thing that I've seen over the years is, and I've been asked this before, and probably several people on this call, is, okay, when are you gonna really do ministry, or when are you moving up in ministry? And I'm in my 40s and still working with teenagers, and you still get those things, but you just have to know that you're called to youth ministry and stay resolved to build those relationships with teenagers. And I think that helps with the longevity, because once you get to know those students and know their hearts and build relationships with those families, they become your family.
For sure.
Yeah, I would agree too that I feel like the longevity depends on the relationship with the teenagers, and that same book also talked about the relationship with the parents. And just even from reading the book, it makes me feel like you know we really need to have thick skin, so when that teenager rejects us or doesn't open up to us, or rejects our attempts to connect, we have to know that it's not us. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like we have to remove our own emotions, our own insecurities, and all of that out. And it's almost like we have to prove ourselves to that student that we are trustworthy. Teenagers come from all different backgrounds, home lives, they may not be able to trust us. And so I think the longevity, can be improved if first of all we're healed and whole, but also even if we're not, if we can truly just separate our own stuff and just be there for them. That's my thoughts.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I would like to, forgive me for not knowing your history, Carrie. Is this your first full-time youth pastorate?
It is, yeah. I was a children's pastor right out of college, right out of Lee for several years, and then ended up in preschool and daycare. And then I've done a little bit of everything, but I ran a nonprofit and worked with teenagers, with the nonprofit that we did. And then, of course, we've done camps like Royal Family Kids camps, and I directed those. So I've worked with teens a lot, but as far as youth pastorate, this is my first youth pastorate. So I agree. Like, I've been here, gosh, maybe 14 months now. And I'm just now connecting with our students, really. It's just taken time. We've had a lot of transition at our church and a new pastor. And we went to the Unplugged retreat, and that was probably where we first really connected, just a couple months ago, because it's just hard on a Wednesday night when you've got, a lot going on and a lot of kids needing you and a lot of things, moving pieces. It just takes time to have those one-on-ones and quality time. And so this has been challenging for me in that, as a children's pastor, you have children that come up and draw you a picture and say, you're doing a great job. Or like when I did women's ministry, people will say, hey, that was a good sermon. But when you had teenagers just looking at you, you're like, whoa, okay. So I think the Lord has really grown me. Just my roots have had to go even deeper during this season, and just depend on the Lord for that affirmation that He's called me here, and just being secure in that, and not desiring that approval from people. So it's really, I think, purified my motives, just just, I don't know. It's been an interesting season, but I'm really just now starting to settle. And so
Well, one of the challenges that you had, if and I don't mean to speak for you,
sure.
but you followed a longtime youth pastor there,
Mhm.
you know.
And they're amazing. They're still at our church too, which is interesting dynamic. And they've been amazing with, they've kind of been in the background saying, hey, if you need us, we're here. But then they've tried to allow me to um, you know, to get my feet wet and for the kids to connect with me, which is, it's been probably as good as it of a transition as possible. But, you know, it is interesting, you know, because you have the kids that have those relationships with them. And so it takes
Yeah.
time.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I want to kind of use as a diving board for our discussion today, probably one of the more important topics that we as youth leaders can talk about. You know, we've talked about the ministry, we've talked about the students, and we've talked about the leader. But today I want our focus to be more along the lines of transitions. And I don't necessarily mean transitions, our transitions, but really, youth ministry is so unique in that we need to be working towards the transition of our kids moving into youth ministry, but also be working and preparing our students to transition into adulthood. And what does adult ministry look like? For years, I mean, I would consider myself to be I was a successful youth pastor, but one of the things that we really struggled with was the transition from from being a teenager to going into adulthood. And what was happening is that many of our students, when they graduated from high school, they were graduating from their faith. And a lot of them weren't returning to the faith until they experienced a crisis, which you hope that they won't, or when they begin to start families of their own and they begin to have children and they're like, "Ooh, you know, I need to get my kids into church like I was," you know. And the problem with that is that there's a lot that can happen from graduation until that moment, whether that is a crisis or they're starting a family. There's a lot that can happen. So, what do we do to help? Let's just take it a bite at a time. Let's talk about the transition from high school to adulthood. Um, what are some things that we need to do, or what are some things that you're doing to help prepare your students for their exit?
When I took over as the youth pastor here, one of the first things I did is looked around at the transition period, and we had a lot of young adults, and I had a bonfire at my house and invited a bunch of them over, and identified Pastor JJ and Naomi that you know, Bishop, and they took young adults, and so we needed something for, even though most of our young adults were serving. I think Sticky Faith talked about there needs to be more than just them serving. They also have to connect spiritually. And so I wanted them, even though if you come to our church on a Sunday, you won't find a mass of students because they're all serving, but they needed a shepherd too. And so we expanded it from 18 to 30 because there were so many young adults who still needed that discipleship, and we launched it. It hadn't been in place at our church, and so there was that graduation of, okay, now you have a special night, call it a small group or whatever, but we wanted to make sure that they had a group of people who were pretty close to their age still, and that's how we addressed it.
Okay.
I don't know if what I am doing is right, but my mindset and where I believe the Lord has led me in preparing them is the spiritual disciplines and using the word as a sort of the spirit, teaching them the power of the word. And like, so a lot of times, you know, I feel like my focus is really equipping them for life, but with the Lord, with the word, using the word. And a lot of times I'll, when I'm talking with them, I remind them, like, you know, the things that I've been through that I didn't have someone teaching me. And I tell them, like, if I knew the things I know now, like the power of the word, the power of the tongue, using the word to speak into our situations and over our lives, to pray the word and things like that, those kinds of disciplines, and having that alone time with God, you know, like I tell them, like, they can have a better life, they can make better choices, they can have that as their foundation. Like, I feel like I'm equipping them with a solid foundation to make it through life, like kind of like that Sticky Faith book was, you know. And I don't know if that's right, and I don't know if that is equipping them for transition into adulthood and all of that, but I do believe that that's kind of the direction God has me taking them. I don't know if it's just because I understand how important that foundation is, and those spiritual disciplines, because if they can remember those things, even if they say stop going to church, or, you know, and I don't ever talk about that, like, well, don't, you know, I don't really talk about, you know, don't stop going to church. I don't really introduce that subject. I really keep it focused on just, you know, how to apply our Christian life to our everyday lives so that they can carry that no matter what.
I think that that's good. I don't think you can go wrong with that. I think that is what we're called to do. I think for me as a youth pastor, when I was in local church ministry, I had to readjust my thinking when it came to what I was called to do and what I was called to prepare them for. I was a lot of times I was concerned with just trying to get them um, to just make it through their own life at the time, instead of preparing them for life after the youth group. Because, you know, we all know the youth ministry, you know, they have all the frou-frou of youth ministry, all of the fun things, you know. And for us, we didn't have a program afterwards after youth group. They left youth group on one Wednesday, and the next Wednesday they were in the pastor's Bible study. And it was hard. It was just, they were like, this is not what I'm not, I don't want to do this, you know. And so so we ended up having to, we ended up starting another program, which I'll tell you about later, but to help in that transition time. But I think what you're doing is right in preparing them to do life with Christ. I mean, that's what we're called to do. And so you know, keep doing what you're doing, but be intentional as well. And I see Samantha has something, and she's got her hand up.
Hi, at our church, we're doing youth, young adult leaders. So, not just allowing them to kind of like coax through and just be a part of like listening every Wednesday and all the fun stuff, but actually giving them an opportunity to lead in worship and, you know, coordinate some events and share their testimony. And then they have asked for a lot more small group sessions where we kind of start out with, you know, some icebreaker type things or fun type things, questions, and then we kind of go into how um, whatever we're discussing or studying at the time applies practically to what's going on in their lives, and trying to come from a perspective of not teaching, not preaching at them, but, you know, like sharing with them and connecting with them that way. Along with our own lifestyle testimony of just when we have like fun events, just you don't leave God when you're at church. Like he has to follow you in appropriate behavior and decisions when you're outside doing all the other things. And then our church has in the last probably like I think it's last probably 18 months, I think, has done a young adult ministry And so there is a transition for them to go from youth group to young adult ministry. And the young adult ministry also has opportunities as they grow to start ministry in, the congregational church body. So like they sometimes lead worship, they have their own worship night, they have, speakers that come and speak to the whole, church and things like that. So, and when on their one-on-one time, they get some, opportunities to delve in with their fellow young adults to practice those kinds of things.
No, I love what you're saying there, because I am a big fan of young adult ministry. If your church can pull that off, a lot of churches can't, or they choose not to. But young adult ministry, I think that is a lost art that our churches are really haven't plugged into a lot of times. Now, I will say that one of the downfalls that I have witnessed with the young adult ministry is defining your brackets of what young adult ministry is. Because what happens is you get these couples, you have to decide, okay, are you going to allow couples to be in young adult ministry? And then at what point do you say, okay, you have to move up into, you don't want to say middle-age ministry, but sometimes you end up having these people that are in a different part of their life, and they're not able to relate to what a 20-year-old is going through, when they're 39 years old, and, and they're just like, oh, they're not dealing with the same things. But then the other thing is you have to really watch with young adult ministry as well, is being careful that it doesn't become a dating ministry. Because that can absolutely destroy your ministry when they begin to date one another and then they don't date anymore. It's just like when kids are dating in the youth group. They break up and one of them's not going to feel welcomed anymore, But just a thought there. And I see Larissa has her hand up.
Yes, I just had a question. I guess I'd be interested to hear, Bishop, your perspective, or even if anybody else can chime in. So our numbers at our church are small. We have a small ministry and we're heavy on little kids and heavy on adults, but the student ministries and the young adults, we're very thin in that age range. And so, for example, our student ministries is 5 students right now, which is fine. But I think what we're finding is it's hard to get consistency out of them because they're all involved in so many other curriculars, and 2 of them are actually graduating this year. So they're going to be moving into that transition period. And so when you have smaller numbers like that, what do you guys find that is, I guess, effective in helping them get through that transition period? Because I know, the one gentleman just mentioned how he had the huge bonfire with all his young adults. Well, we don't really have that group to kind of pull them into. So what, I guess, suggestions or what things have you guys used that kind of helps that?
Okay, I'll give you guys an opportunity to respond before I do.
Well, I've been in that situation before as well. And one of the things I did is just make myself very visible on campuses. I would find out if the 5 students are involved in any clubs. And so, for instance, if you have a kid who's in something like a chess club or a football program or whatever, and I would go and talk to their coach and say, hey, I want to feed the team, or let me buy the Gatorades. And I showed interest in those 5 students per se, what they're involved in. And when their friends saw that I was so active and involved in their school and then what they were doing, their friends started wanting to come as well. And so it wasn't, hey, I'm just going to church. It was, hey, here's a youth pastor who's involved in our life, who is relatable. And so I started making sure that those teenagers knew that they could come and talk, and I would see them in the schools. A lot depends on the school district, but that really helped me, is just being where they are, and that becomes contagious and then attracts more students.
For ours, Our group is really small, but we ended up combining our youth and young adults together. Mostly because our youth were, teens, not like really young. And because of the setup that we do, I don't sit there or stand there and preach at them. We do it like a round circle, and it's more small groupish. I bring what the Lord's given me, but then I give them opportunity to share or, respond and whatnot. And then the young adults, if they're further along in their faith, and they're also able to speak into the youth. And so it's like, I don't know, but it works for us. I don't know if that's something that would work for you I don't know. So ours is together. Youth and young adult are together. And we're still small. If everybody's there, we only have like maybe 10, 12 people. But it works.
So one of
So,
the, go ahead.
okay.
Go ahead.
We have a larger church here. It's kind of harder to get into schools, but growing up, my parents pastored a church. We probably had 30 people. And when I was a teenager, we probably had 4 in our youth group, me, my brother, and my 2 cousins. And my parents would have, they would just have youth group at our house. And then we would invite a friend or two. And then I was involved with the Bible club at school. We just started having students over and worshiping together. And then our friends just invited their friends, and like we outgrew the house and had to start meeting at another church closer to our house. And it was just really amazing to have that kind of home where we just opened our doors to kids, and they just felt comfortable. And I would encourage you to do that. But that small group atmosphere led to a larger group as they had that safe place where we could get together. And then we started serving together, going out. We had our own little mini master's commission going on. So it was pretty cool.
And I think that you have to be consistent in what you are doing. If you don't see results right away, you just keep at it. Just keep at it. It's something that I learned years ago. I worked for a pastor who was a self-made multimillionaire before he became a pastor. And one of the things he was very good at was marketing. And there were just little tricks that he taught me throughout the years that he learned in marketing that he applied to ministry. And one of those is when you start to advertise, let's say that you have a business and you buy a billboard, you're not going to see the fruits of your labor in the first month of that billboard being up. It's going to have to be in front of people for 6 months to a year before you're going to start seeing results from your advertising. And ministry is a lot like that, in that you just have to be consistent. And a lot of times that's what our students want from us, is they just want to see that consistency. They know that you can be there for those small moments. Or all right, you're getting into this game, you're the new person, you're the new woman, you're the new man on, in the church. Well, are you going to give me more? You're going to invest in us more than just a couple weeks. It may take 6 months, it may take a year, but what's going to happen, just like with what Carrie was saying, is that all of a sudden it's like a snowball, and it's just going to start collecting, and the more that it collects, the faster it gets, and until all of a sudden you're just going to wake up one morning and you're going to be like, I can't believe I got 20 students, or and so don't get discouraged, and just be consistent. A lot of times those students just want to see that consistency. To go along with that, also, one of the challenges that we had, as I told you earlier, was was keeping our students after graduation. And because we didn't have a young adult ministry, we just created one. And we did we did an internship. So if you wanted to stay in the youth group, you weren't ready to go into the pastor's Bible study, we offered a year-long internship the first year after you graduated from high school. But there were benchmarks that you had to do throughout the year. You couldn't, it just wasn't, you were going to be a part of this because you didn't want to leave. You actually had to go through like, and I may have told you guys this in one of our previous meetings. The first thing that a student had to do if they wanted to do our internship was to read the Bible in 90 days. That was your first 3 months in our internship program. And what that did is it weeded out the ones that weren't serious about it. You knew right away whether they were wanting this because they had a calling on their life or they just didn't want to grow up. And then there were other things that they had to do. They had to actually they had to lead a ministry within the youth group. And if there wasn't a ministry that they were comfortable in leading, then we helped them create a ministry that they could lead. And then on top of that, they actually had to be involved in a ministry outside of the youth ministry. That way, that got them plugged in as another connecting point. Now, they could serve in another church, in another ministry in the church, or if they found a ministry that was in the community, that was acceptable as well. And so what we ended up finding out is that we actually created a young adult group out of the internship. And then that helped in that transition so we weren't losing them. But then that was like Tracy was talking about, you've got teenagers with the young adults. You have to be very careful with that, though. Sometimes parents are a little finicky about allowing these adults to be with their students because potentially you could have a 12-year-old with a 20-year-old in the same ministry, and some people are not comfortable with that. Any thoughts from you guys?
Thank you for all the input.
Sure.
I would like to add one thing when you were talking about consistency, Josh, like it reminded me, like, especially with having a small group, like on average, if it's 5 kids, like if 2 of them don't show up, I'll be completely honest and transparent here. That thought crosses my mind, like, well, we just won't meet. Why am I going to do that? And it's not that I don't want to do it for them. It's the thought. This is really bad. I'm just gonna be honest. The thought is, I have this message or this stuff, right? I don't want to waste it on just a couple kids, right? And it's like, how wrong is that thinking? And it's like, God had to check me. And now it's like, even if the thought tries to come in, I'm like, no, like those 2 students showed up. Those 2 students deserve to hear what God has for them. And what if it's only for them? Or what if just having those 2 students allows for a more intimate environment so that they can share openly? Or you know what I mean? Like, but my point in saying all that was the consistency I think is important, even if it's only 2 students, even if it's 1 student, still do it. Like, no matter what.
I think you could teach this session on this because that's exactly right. I could not have said it better myself, because don't you think that God knew who was going to be there that night? And just for those students, because here's the thing about students, they absolutely, they know whether you're being genuine or not. And they also know whether, they pick up on the fact, they know that you prepared for 5 students. And the fact that you would still teach it if there was two, or even, God forbid, that there was just one student. That student was the one that was chosen to hear that message. And, now you can adjust the way that you deliver it depending on how many are in your group. But that's a great point. Thank you for pointing that out. All right. Well, go ahead, Carrie.
Just on the young adults in general, like a couple things we're strategizing as a staff. We were looking at, we just signed up for Planning Center. We transitioned our church system, and looking at there's like a chart on the people part, and our demographics are that 19 to 35 age range is like, I mean, you're like up here for 12 to 18, and then you go down and then back up at like age 40 or 50. So it's really just been burden, on us, like where's our church going to be in 10, 15 years, So we're strategizing together, as a staff on how to meet those needs. But just a couple, like we have our graduation tomorrow night for our seniors. I think in the past we've just kind of said, okay, this is it, you're out of youth group, but we are starting a couple small groups where the young adults are helping, like we're doing a high school hangout thing, but those transitioning seniors are still allowed to go to that. And then we have some another young adult group that's coming to just kind of share at the graduation, here's what our group does, and this is how you can be involved with it. Just communicating, and kind of like, instead of just saying you're done, like, giving them, like you said, like the transitional period, like you're doing with camp. And then another thing was, we had come from a church, it was a non-denominational church, but it was kind of the other way on the chart. Like it was all 19 to 35. And really just watching the way that young adults were just part of the lifeblood of the congregation, like just using their gifts and their abilities. And our pastor's wife, she just had these visions for, like she wanted to do movies. And so she would just find young adult photographers in our church who were creative, and she'd paint the vision, and she'd keep them accountable and work with them until we had an amazing promo for the next conference or whatever. And then she had them intern. And now she has an entire creative staff at that church. And so just really utilizing the gifts and the talents that the millennials are bringing, Gen Z's bringing to the table. What can we do to allow them to serve, and giving them some leadership responsibilities and roles to play. But anyway,
I think that's good. That's a great point there. Something that we talked about last night in we did our kids ministry certification call last night. And one of the things we talked about building a children's ministry and how you do that is if you want to see a particular people group in your church, like maybe if you see where you're deficient in an area, then you take those representatives of that demographic and you put them on the stage. So if you want to see more young adults in your services, then you give them roles on the stage on Sunday mornings, and you allow them to minister in those moments. It works the same with kids. It also, I know this is groundbreaking stuff, but let's say that your vision is to have more of a multicultural, multi-ethnic, a diverse congregation, and you're noticing that you're missing a particular people group, then you put that people group on the stage. That's what you do. That's church growth right there. And so just a thought there with that. The other part of what we get to deal with is not our students transitioning out, but other side, which is transitioning our students in. And I've seen a lot of youth ministries really struggle with transitioning those kids in. And a lot of times it's not even the kids. The issue is not with the kids, it's with the parents. And the parents are not prepared to have their students, their kids, their children to come into youth ministry. We're dealing with this on the state level with youth camp. That's one of the reasons that we did, and Carrie referenced it earlier. That's why one of the things we did for youth camp this year is if you are a graduating 5th grader going into 6th grade, you can choose which camp you want to go to. You can go to elementary, or you can go to middle school camp, or if you're feeling frisky, you can go to both if you want to do that. And we're doing the same thing with graduating 8th graders moving up into 9th grade. And they get the same opportunity to choose. Now, one of the things that we are dealing with, I have one church in particular that they have asked for a year of grace. They have 7th graders that are going into 8th grade that they have asked if they can stay back in elementary camp because their maturity level, they don't feel is ready for middle school ministry. I have a definite opinion about that, but I also understand that not everybody does ministry the way that I do ministry. So I'd be interested to pick your brains on how you transition, or do you need some suggestions on how to transition your kids from kids men into youth ministry? What do you do?
Bishop, we're doing something brand new. I've got a meeting with church staff on this tomorrow. We are doing a social the week, after school starts up, and then the transitioning students. We are going to have ice cream, and we're going to invite parents from toddlers who are going into the big kids area, from big kids going into middle school. And we're going to just invite parents and students to get a preview of the week before they officially transition grades, and have ice cream and let parents meet the leaders, let them get a feel for the flow of a service, let them sit in a service. And so we're doing that from toddlers all the way up to college and career age, to where they're going to get a preview night and get to see what's going on. Matt, who's behind me, helped me tremendously with the transition in the middle school. We have 8 middle schoolers who are going to be transitioning from kids' church into middle school. And we use the curriculum from the Church of God as our basis for middle school discipleship, which has been wonderful. Matt might be able to speak on that more than I can, because he really launched it for us. But so we realized that there was a significant maturity gap between middle school from the 5th and 6th graders. And then another one of our leaders is volunteering in that 5th grade gap to try to ease that transition for students. But so we have something to encourage parents, to let them see what's going on, give them a flow, and then a transitional period for those middle schoolers. And we're finding that successful, because we're losing 2 seniors who are moving up into the young adults, but we're getting an influx of 8 middle schoolers now. So we're hoping this goes well. We're going to try it. Maybe on the next call I can let you know how it went. But having an ice cream social and orientation, just like you would for going to college or a new business or anything, to give people a feel for it.
Okay, it's a great idea. Anyone else?
Last year we was my first year, but we had 5th grade small groups. And so as the youth pastor, I would go as they were getting ready to graduate from elementary, just to talk with them on a Sunday morning in their small group, kind of ease their mind about youth youth group, and of course emailed their parents as well. But then we had we did a thanks for popping in kind of thing, and we did popcorn, and so they came to observe youth, and we of course gave tours and let the parents stay if they wanted. We had welcome gifts for everybody, just kind of made it fun. What I did find was, that the parents were a little more concerned about leaving their kids than the kids were. This time, I think we have small groups according to age, but our sixth grade small group leaders are going to cling to them when they come that first time, and then throughout the summer, just work them, stay close to them. We don't have small groups every week, but those small group leaders of the sixth graders are going to make sure that they are with them and just see how they do with moving up with that. But we'd love to have a whole, curriculum or something for those middle school, that transition period. It's a hard time getting them to stay, and
Yeah, it is tough. And especially if you do middle school and high school together, that is terrifying for middle schoolers coming in coming into youth group. It's a little easier if you separate your middle school and your high school.
Right. I know Tony and Tracy had a program a while ago where they had the senior, like they had a mentor program. So they would pair seniors in high school with the upcoming sixth graders, like when they would go on trips and things, and they would mentor them. And I know some of those adults now are still in contact with those mentees, and that program that they developed really worked at our church. So
Okay, that's a good idea. Samantha, I see your hand is up.
Hi, our youth pastor, she's online right now, but our youth pastor is very intentional about leading the small group for fifth graders for VBS, so that as they transition into youth ministry, they already have a connection with her as the leader of that ministry, and she knows these kids that are leaving, the fifth grade group, that they go to, vacation Bible school, and then at the end of the summer they transition up to join young adult ministry. And then I think it's also important that we at our church, we've got a really good backing from our leadership team. So for announcements, they'll announce that the activities that youth group has planned for the summer, so the parents hear it not just from their kids coming up, who are aware, or from the flyers from the kids ministry group that are letting parents know as they know which one of the kids are transitioning into youth group in the next couple of months, but also throughout the year, whenever there's an event going on for youth group, it's announced during service, so the parents are aware of what's going on and how many different types of things are going on. And then also the support of like our bigger programs, so like for youth camp, so that the parents know that youth camp is coming up, and that they can sign up and register and everything like that. And then when we do those events, then there's like a follow-up afterwards. So after youth camp, our youth pastor will have a couple of the kids come up and give their testimony of what they experienced during camp and how it impacted them. And so the parents get to hear what's happening with the young people as they go, and other parents that have parent kids that are coming up in kids ministry or with youth group are getting a feel for the types of effects that happen, and benefits from sending their kids to youth group. So that's a real good thing that we do.
I love it. Incorporating youth camp into this, I especially love.
Yeah, I would say the curriculum for Church of God helped really good. We started playing games beforehand, before we got the curriculum, just Bible knowledge games, and we realized the middle school boys significantly were just less mature than the girls in their knowledge and action. So it worked really well in helping them mature out and learn more stuff. To answer your question, though, I would say it would hinder someone in seventh grade to go into a fifth grade situation. I think at that age, you're best bet is to be around people closer to your age, because maybe that'll help you mature yourself more, as opposed to getting with kids and keeping that maturity level low.
I agree. Sometimes you have to choose which hill you're ready to die on. So as far as youth camp goes, and let me rephrase that, it's not a 7th grader. I made a mistake there. It's a 6th grader going into 7th grade that is wanting to stay in the elementary camp. But for me, it's a win simply because they're at youth camp. So but I understand the dynamics of that church and where they're at. So that's one of the things that but you are absolutely right. I agree with you on that, Matt. So Samantha, you got your hand up again.
Sorry, I forgot to mention this. We also you said it was scary, like, youth, the middle school and high school together. So we do that on Wednesday nights. We have the whole group, middle school and high school together. But on Sundays, during our second service, we've got a smaller group that's dedicated just for middle school. So they've got like their own crew that, meets on Sundays and goes over topics and shares practicality and the word and all that. And so what they usually do is they'll start out the service upstairs with the general congregation during worship. And then after worship, they go down for small group for middle school. So the parents get to see that there's a whole group of kids that just like exit, so that's like, what are they doing? And then other kids that are involved, that are, at that age range, whether they're coming up in church or they haven't, joined our youth program yet, get to see these kids and want to find out what's going on. And it's a good motivation for them as well.
I like it. I like it.
We do that same transition too. We would have students in worship, and then all the middle schoolers would be released to go to their study as well. And it was very helpful, I think.
Yeah. Good. I'm gonna bring this, try to land the plane here in the next couple of minutes, because I want to get you guys out of here in an hour. But I will tell you that probably the most important thing when it comes to transitioning kids into youth ministry is the relationship that you have with the children's leader or the children's pastor. Now, sometimes in a smaller church, the youth leader or the youth pastor is also the kids pastor or the kids leader. So your relationship is tight in that moment. So, but I think that you need to make sure that you are communicating on a regular basis with your children's leader, your children's pastor, and be intentional on creating moments to make those kids that are coming up feel like they matter and that they're important. Additionally, I just want to throw this out there. I know of a youth pastor that every year, now they are a larger church, so there's a little bit of a better budget than most of us on this call. But for the graduating 5th graders coming into 6th grade, they do what's called a rope weekend, ROPE weekend. And it is a retreat only for those up and coming 6th graders. The rope stands for rite of passage experience. And they actually create these moments during the weekend where they bring in the high schoolers that can be trusted, and they let them have this weekend with these up and coming middle schoolers. And they have a moment during the weekend where they give them something. I don't know, I haven't been on the weekend, but it's something that is significant. That's like, okay, now you are one of us now. And so when they have their first Wednesday night in youth group, they already have seen people that are their age, as well as some of these upperclassmen that actually had already begun to invest in them during that weekend. So it is not as terrifying and as frightening to come into a youth group. So just something to think about, just an idea, but just want to throw that out there. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation tonight. I always enjoy our conversation. This is one of the highlights of my month, is when I get to come and talk with youth leaders, and just like you and many of you, several of you, I'd only seen you in the Zoom call until we had the girls' jamboree a couple weeks ago, and some of you attacked me in the parking lot and was like, "Hey, we're in your class," you know. So please do that anytime you see me, because you look different in person than you do on a little screen that's this big on my computer. So let me pray for you all, and then we'll let you guys go. God, we thank you for this time that we've had together. God, I thank you for the time that that these leaders have dedicated to you and to their students. I ask that you would reward them for their faithfulness, Lord. God, I pray for protection on them, their families, their congregations, their churches, their communities, Lord. And I ask that you would use them to invest in young people, use them to invest in leaders that minister to young people as well. God, I thank you for all that they do. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And I'm looking at the calendar, and we're going to do the next call, which will be the last one of this group, on June 27th. That is a Tuesday. I'm trying to get everything done before youth camp. That's why I'm not going to push it to Thursday, because we have our special needs camp at the end of that week. So June 27th, 7 p.m. We'll keep it to an hour. And also, let me make sure I put this in my calendar. I do want to let you guys know of 2 dates that we have on the calendar. You already know about camp, so I'm not going to go into details with that, but that's the first 3 weeks in July. But as we get into the fall, I want you to know that our guys' getaway is September 8th and 9th. September 8th and 9th, and it's at the campground, okay? So we'll have the details on that coming out soon, and that is for youth and kids as well. This is a great opportunity to do like a father-son weekend, or if you got some leaders that want to invest in the boys in your group, okay? And then one of my favorite weekends of the year is going to be October 13th and 14th. It is our VILA conference, October 13th and 14th, and that's going to be on the campground. Our theme this year is refuel, okay? Refuel is the theme, and I'm really excited. If you've been to several of our events already, you know that I theme things out. And so I'm looking at getting a couple race cars out in front of the cafeteria, and it's all going to be about pouring back into yourselves and helping us to invest in you with this whole idea of being refueled. So that is for youth and children's leaders that weekend, okay? And you get to stay on the campground. It's nothing like staying in those dorms, especially if you are unlucky enough to not get the new girls' dorm. So, all right. So you have those dates. Any questions from anybody?
2 questions. One, what's the age range for the men's time? What's the minimum age?
The guys get away.
The guys get away.
There's no age deal with it.
And do you have enough signed up for most of the leaders for the camps to get assistance this year, or should we try to bring our own?
Ask me that question again?
Did you have enough sign up for youth camp for most of the youth leaders or the leaders to get assistance, or should we bring our own?
No, we'll have that taken care of. Now, we do need some, we are still looking. We don't have as many people signed up for kids camp as I would like. And right now, kids camp is our largest camp. We are almost at 70% capacity in kids camp already.
Bishop, I'm trying to free up my schedule for the high school week, and you're still doing
I'm doing middle
you're
school.
doing middle school. But I'm gonna see if I can free myself up to fill out an application and work high school
Okay. All right.
and the special needs students day.
Yeah. Help us pray for that. We've got lots of volunteers, which is we're going to need them. We are not we don't have a lot of people that are thinking they have to register for this. So we've heard people are coming, but we don't have their registrations yet. So that makes things a little difficult to plan. But anyway, so help us with that because that's coming up really soon. But we're really excited about it. All right. I appreciate all of you. Thanks for what you do. What you do is important and it matters. So keep doing it. Be strong. And if I can be of any help to you, don't hesitate to reach out. All right.